One question, two views. You decide.
All right, let's jump right into one of the great archaeological mysteries, the Moai statues of Easter Island. I mean, how on earth did an ancient civilization move these absolute giants? The big debate really boils down to two ideas. Were they walked upright, or were they dragged on massive sleds? In this explainer, we're going to dig into something fascinating, what each of those methods could tell us about the society itself, the very fabric of the Rapa Nui people. So, here's the big question for today. What level of social organization would each Moai transport method actually require? We're going to explore the two main theories and see what they suggest about how ancient Rapa Nui society was structured. This is going to be good. Okay, so we've got two very different pictures here. View number one is that the Moai were walked upright. And if that's true, it points to a more decentralized, kind of clan-based society. But then you've got view number two. They were moved on sleds. And that idea, well, that suggests a much more coordinated, centrally controlled system. So which was it? A bunch of independent family groups working together, or a massive state-run project? Let's find out. To get to the bottom of this, we're going to break it down into three key arguments. First, we'll look at labor and coordination, then infrastructure and planning, and finally, knowledge and resources. All right, let's dive into our first argument, labor and coordination. This is all about the people power. Just how big was the workforce and how were they organized? And right away, you can see how the two theories paint completely different pictures. Are we talking about small, independent teams getting the job done on their own? Or are we picturing massive, directed crews all working in sync? The answer here is a huge clue about their whole society. Now, if you're on team walking, the evidence is pretty stunning. One experiment managed to move a 4.5-ton replica 100 meters with, get this, just 18 people. 18! That's a crew size a single extended family could probably pull together no problem. And that small crew size, it fits perfectly with what we think we know about Rapa Nui's social structure. See, the island was basically divided into these independent clans called Matawata. Each one could have totally managed its own statue project. And the archaeology seems to back this up. At the main quarry, they found evidence of like 30 separate independent workshops. It really paints a picture of decentralized, parallel efforts. Okay, but what about the sledge theory? Well, here the numbers get a whole lot bigger. Experiments suggest you'd need somewhere between 40 and 48 people, just for the pulling. And that's not even counting the specialists you'd need for things like levering and steering. But it's not just about the raw numbers. To get that many people working together, pulling in sync, braking at the right time, you need a boss. You need some kind of authority figure to assemble and direct that huge crew. This points to a much more hierarchical society, right? And that idea kind of clashes with that evidence we saw of all those small, independent workshops at the quarry. Okay, let's shift gears to our second argument, infrastructure and planning. So what about the roads? Did they have to build the ancient equivalent of a superhighway for these statues? Or did the paths just kind of happen? And this is another huge point of conflict. On the one hand, the walking view says you get these organic, emergent paths. The routes are basically created by the process of moving the statues. But on the other hand, the sledge view absolutely requires pre-planned, engineered roads. They'd have to be built before a single Moai even started its journey. So for the walking theory, the proof is literally in the pudding, or in this case, the path. The ancient paths have this really distinct curved shape. They're concave, and the argument is that this groove was formed naturally by the side-to-side rocking of the walking statues, slowly wearing down the ground over many, many years. So think about it like this. The road wasn't a prerequisite. It was a byproduct. It's like a footprint left behind, not a highway built in advance. And what does that mean? Well, it means you don't need any central planning committee. This fits perfectly with that idea of different clans just forging their own separate path out from the quarry, all spreading out like spokes on a wheel. The sledge theory, though, that implies a ton of planning. I mean, building a road capable of handling a massive statue is a serious engineering project. You've got to survey the route, you've got to flatten the ground, you've got to build it with wooden rails, and then you have to maintain the thing. That level of foresight, that kind of investment, it just screams powerful, centralized authority. You'd need specialized engineers, dedicated construction crews, a whole system for managing everything. Which, of course, raises a big question. If you had a central authority planning all this, why would you build so many separate radial paths? Wouldn't it make more sense to build just a few efficient, standardized highways? The sheer scale of this points to a top-down kind of society. Okay, on to our final argument, and this one is all about control. With any big project, you need two things, the know-how and the stuff to do it with. So who held the knowledge, and who controlled the resources needed to move these giant statues? And again, the two views couldn't be more different. The walking view suggests that the knowledge and materials were pretty common, available to just about everyone. But the sledge view? It argues that they were scarce resources, controlled by a small, specialized group. And that, of course, creates a power structure. So from the walking perspective, the whole shebang relies on rope. And rope making was a basic, fundamental skill for any Polynesian society. You needed it for your canoes, for sailing, for everything. The materials were everywhere, and the know-how was just passed down through families. Plus, the physics of rocking something heavy back and forth, it's pretty intuitive, right? You don't need a PhD to figure that out. So no single group could really monopolize the process. But the sledge view flips that on its head. The argument here is that control over just one key resource would create a natural bottleneck, concentrating power right into the hands of a select few. And that has huge social implications. Think about it. Large timber for building sleds was a very scarce, very valuable resource. So whoever controlled the timber, well, they controlled who could move statues, period. This would naturally create a hierarchy, right? You'd have your technical elites and your resource gatekeepers. And that idea, once again, seems to run counter to the archaeological evidence of all that decentralized production. All right, so let's recap. We asked a pretty big question at the start of all this. What kind of society would each transport method require? And we looked at it from three angles. First, the labor involved. Second, the kind of infrastructure they'd need. And third, who controlled the knowledge and resources. So view 1 makes the case that walking, the Moai, with its small crews, its paths formed by the journey, and its easily accessible knowledge, fits perfectly with a decentralized clan-based society. But view 2 argues that dragging them on sleds, with huge crews, pre-built roads, and controlled resources, points directly to a society with much more centralized control. We've laid out both sides for you. We're not taking a position here. So now it's over to you. What do you think? Can the way something was moved really tell us everything about an ancient society? Let us know what you think down in the comments. And hey, if there's another big question you want us to tackle next, drop it in there too.